The 1980s truly redefined terror through practical gore and transgressive storytelling that pushed every cinematic boundary to its limits. Today, we are ranking the 10 essential cult masterpieces that prove why the 80s still hold the crown for pure, unfiltered horror. We're not just talking about box office hits, we're focusing on practical effects heavy cult favorites that went from video store staples to horror canon. And one of these was considered too bleak on release and only became legendary decades later. Number 10, Friday the 13th, 1980. We're kicking things off right at the start of the decade with a movie that turned summer camps into a total nightmare. Now, everyone knows the hockey mask, but the original Friday the 13th is actually a much more grounded story about a parent's spiral into vengeful grief. It completely flips the nurturing mother trope on its head and turns it into something genuinely terrifying. Behind the scenes, this is a masterclass in low-budget magic. The legendary Tom Savini had to invent brand new methods for realistic kills with almost no resources. He even used a real machete for some of the effects. It was a huge statement against the censors of the time who hated how much the camera lingered on the reality of death. You've got to start here if you want to see exactly where the slasher genre found its gritty, unapologetic soul. If you want more horror lore breakdowns like this, then hit subscribe. We're pushing toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and every new one genuinely helps us make more videos like this. Number 9, Re-Animator, 1985. If you've got a taste for the weird and the pitch black, Re-Animator is your holy grail. This movie goes full tilt into the messiest parts of bringing back the dead and shows exactly why human curiosity can lead to a total disaster. We follow Herbert West, a medical student with a glowing neon reagent that jumpstarts corpses, even if the results are usually violent and just plain wrong. The set was as intense as the script. They used so much theatrical blood that the actors had to be hosed down between takes so they wouldn't get literally glued to the furniture by the corn syrup. These practical effects are pure DIY genius, using everything from household junk to basic puppets to bring creatures to life. It's not pretty, and that's exactly why it works. This is the one to grab if you're looking to choose between cosmic horror and stomach-churning slapstick comedy. Number 8, Hellraiser, 1987. Clive Barker's Hellraiser ditched the usual mass killer tropes to explore the thin line between extreme pleasure and unbearable pain. The story revolves around the iconic puzzle box, a one-way ticket to a dimension of sensation that the human brain can't even handle. It plays with the idea that if you push desire too far, it turns into something monstrous but strangely beautiful. The creativity here is honestly mind-blowing for such a small budget. Since they couldn't afford CGI, they filmed a puppet being dissolved into acid and ran the footage backwards to handle Frank's rebirth. The Cenobite prosthetics were a massive manual labor project. Every single nail in Pinhead's face was hammered in by hand to look fused to the bone. It brought a dark, carnal energy to horror which we have never seen before. It should be your go-to pick for nights when you want your horror to be as intellectually heavy as it is physically intense. Number 7, Possession, 1981. Now, for some seriously heavy emotional territory, Possession takes the wreckage of a failing marriage and turns that pain into a literal physical monster. Sam Neill and Isabella Gianni are so raw and frantic here that it's actually hard to watch. They capture that exact moment when a human being snaps from repressed rage. Filming this was notoriously brutal. Johnny later said that the intensity of the legendary subway breakdown took her years to recover from. The creature effects were handled by Carlo Rambaldi, who took a break from blockbusters like E.T. to create something way more disturbing and felt. It's a masterpiece of psychological dread, and it's perfect for anyone who wants a movie that feels like a 2-hour emotional gut punch instead of just cheap jump scares. Number 6, A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Wes Craven totally changed the game by making a neighborhood's dirty secret the literal killer of their kids. Freddy Krueger is the physical ghost of those sins coming back for revenge. By attacking people in their sleep, the movie weaponizes the one place where we're all completely defenseless. The practical problem solving here is legendary. To get the shot of a character getting swallowed by a bed and sprayed onto the ceiling, the crew built a giant rotating room. They literally flipped the set upside down and let gravity do the work with gallons of red water. Even the glove was handmade with real blades to look like something welded together in a garage. If the twisted logic of a nightmare is more terrifying than any CGI monster, you definitely shouldn't sleep on this one. Alright, I've gotta stop and settle classic debate. In a real deal showdown, who do you think actually wins between Jason and Freddy? Personally, I think Freddy takes it every time. I mean, you can't exactly punch a guy who lives inside your head. So drop your take in the comments. I want to see the arguments. Number 5, An American Werewolf in London, 1981. This movie gave the classic werewolf idea a cynical and hilarious makeover. The story is really about the burden of survival, watching a guy deal with a supernatural curse while his dead best friend literally rots away in front of him. The transformation scene is still incredible to watch. Rick Baker refused to hide the effects in the dark. He did the whole thing in a bright room so you could see every gruesome detail. He actually won the first ever Oscar for Best Makeup because of it. They used mechanical heads and latex that stretched in real time, spending months making hair look like it was punching through skin. No camera tricks, just pure craftsmanship. It's a perfect choice for lovers of old school creature features with a really dark human heart. Number 4, The Fly, 1986. David Cronenberg is the king of body horror, and The Fly is his crowning achievement. It takes the idea of physical decay, a metaphor for disease or aging, and turns it into a heartbreaking romance. Watching Jeff Goldblum's character literally fall apart piece by piece is just devastating. The prosthetic work is next level. They used 7 stages of makeup to show the change, using everything from food products to slimes to make it look wet and biological. It's a tragic story that asks how much of yourself you can lose before you aren't human anymore. And it does it with a level of detail you just can't forget. Put this at the top of your queue if you want a viewing experience that leaves you both intellectually stimulated and physically uneasy. Number 3, The Shining, 1980. Stanley Kubrick took a ghost story and turned it into this cold, clinical look at domestic trauma. The Shining is all about cycles of violence repeating themselves in a trapped space. It breaks every rule by being bright and symmetrical, proving you don't need shadows to make people feel terrified. The precision here was borderline obsessive. Kubrick used the then new Steadicam to get those eerie floating shots of Danny in the hallways. And that elevator blood, it took months of engineering to ensure the pressure was high enough to look like a tidal wave without instantly destroying the set. That's technical perfection. This is honestly a rewarding watch for anyone who views horror as high-level art rather than just a thrill ride. Number 2, The Evil Dead, 1981. Next, we're heading deep into the woods for a film that redefined the cabin in the woods trope with a relentless, low-budget attack on the senses. The Evil Dead is the absolute peak of sheer willpower and resourcefulness. Sam Raimi and his friends went into the forest with a 16mm camera and a goal to create something that would leave audiences physically exhausted. The filming conditions were a total nightmare. The cast was freezing, blinded by thick contact lenses, and had zero budget for equipment. They couldn't afford a camera crane, so they built a Ramocam, basically a camera nailed to a long board, and had 2 guys sprint through the trees to get that famous unseen entity shot. This remains the ultimate benchmark for any creator who wants to see what you can achieve with nothing but a group of friends and a massive amount of passion. Before our number 1 pick, here are 3 honorable mentions that define the decade but just missed the list. Poltergeist, 1982. This one turned the living room television into a doorway to a nightmare. While it's remembered for its wonder, the focus on its corporation building over the dead for profit gives it seriously a dark edge. Pumpkinhead, 1988. A dark folktale about the price of a father's grief. Stan Winston directed this himself, pouring his design genius into a suit that feels like a breathing nightmare. Everything feels thick with real mud and tangible moonlight, capturing that handmade spirit of late 80s horror, where the monsters felt like they were actually standing in the room. The Return of the Living Dead, 1985. This gave us the punk rock take on the apocalypse and introduced zombies that crave brains to ease the agony of being dead. The energy here is off the charts, blending a rebellious spirit with grotesque melting gore. It leaned into a bleak worldview, suggesting the powers that be will just drop a nuke to clean up the mess. It's loud, fast, and ends with the most iconic wrong place, wrong time phone call in cinema history. And number 1, The Thing, 1982. Finally, we've got the undisputed king. John Carpenter's The Thing is the ultimate masterclass in paranoia. Set in a frozen Antarctic station, a group of guys realizes any one of them could be an alien mimic. It's about that terrifying feeling of not knowing if you can trust the person sitting right next to you. The practical effects are legendary. Bottin was only 22 when he did this, and he worked himself so hard he literally ended up in the hospital. He used everything from melted plastic to mayonnaise to make these monsters feel real. There's no digital safety net here. Everything you see is a physical object being moved by artists. It flopped when it came out because it was considered too bleak, but now it's the gold standard for creature horror. Definitely give this a try if you love uncompromising tactile horror. Well, folks, that wraps up our list of the top 10 cult horror masterpieces. Which of these rad 80s titles deserves a modern revival? Let's see your thoughts in the comments,